Hello and welcome to Property Question Time. I'm Stephen Galpin, and today joining me on Question Time is Ryan Hughes, CEO and founder of Mr. Investa brand, buy-to-let experts. Welcome to you, Ryan.
Thanks, Stephen.
And joining Ryan is John Reynolds, CEO of Titan Property Developments. Welcome to you, John.
Thanks,
Good to have
Stephen.
you both back. We're going to be answering our viewers' questions today, and we're going to get straight on with you, Ryan. And the first question is this. I am a buy-to-let landlord and have 6 properties in Greater London area. I have it in mind to increase the size of my portfolio and at the same time widen the geographical profile of my investments. As new investment areas won't be familiar to me, I propose to follow the government's levelling up agenda in terms of potential areas for my investments. However, it does seem like levelling up has stalled, and I would ask the panel's view on whether there has been any real or visible progress with the government's plans, and if so, in which areas? Well, I mean, where do you start with that one? I mean, you've got HS2. It's not even coming into London now, isn't it? They're slowing the speed down so it doesn't cost more money. So it's going to be slower than the existing train, not come anywhere near London like the current one does. So what's levelling up going to do?
I think the big problem is when you look into the government that haven't delivered on certain projects or plans for this levelling up, are you going to go for that for your investment when there's no sort of specific benefits, whereas you're better off looking at the private infrastructure that's being put in and delivered and where the jobs have been created and good universities. That's always our go-to. Job creation, universities, expansion, predominantly in the private sector that are delivering, that are funding and that have got a track record. I think when these levelling up, it's a case of everyone's got these big expectations, but it's how long do you want to wait for them to deliver it in terms of when you need to invest? Because a lot of people, it's not the right time to invest, but for a lot of people it is. But by the time certain levelling up or these areas have been announced of these fantastic benefits, that person can't invest anymore. It's just that change in circumstance. People often ask us, I'm going to wait a bit, or now's the right time. And sometimes you think, oh no, now's the worst time. Oh no, you should be investing now. And they go, I'm going to wait a couple of months, but it's personal circumstance. So when someone's ready to press the trigger on a buy-to-let or a block or a new development, it has to be of their own schedule.
Yes.
And if you're waiting on the government, you may never purchase.
Well, I mean, I think, Ryan, you know, we look around and I listen to people in the past say, we follow the railways, so the new stations, we follow them, we follow this, we follow that. I mean, if you're following the HS2 stations, you'd come unstuck now, wouldn't you? Or I mean, I think I heard on the news this morning, they announced that it will come into London later on, but in 2040. Well,
And that could be delayed as well.
Of course it can.
Yeah, I mean, anything reliant on the government is a big risk. You just said that private infrastructure, following where jobs are, that's great. And the other thing as well, working from home, the trend from working from home. I've seen it, for example, in Bournemouth. People that are in tech will have that opportunity to work from home, then can choose where they live. And then they're choosing areas that might have natural beauty or the beach, what have you. And that's gone crazy there. Rents and sale prices, house prices have gone through the roof.
Yeah.
We've seen a huge increase in commercial developers going to suburban, greeny, leafy areas, and great building, glass buildings, so they sort of fit in with that. They don't really ruin it with a big brick building or a big steel frame in the middle of parks or somewhere with a bit of land to create office space for the surrounding areas rather than going in the city centres. And then some of the train lines are obsolete. So I think you really have to assess it. Transport's always a great one to look at, whether it's motorway links, bus links, because you want where the people are. But I think when you're looking at private, it's more reliable.
Yeah. Well, I think your point, Ryan, is a good one in a way. If you just follow the normal course of looking at demographics and understanding what's there today. I mean, I got a ticking off the other week. I made a comment about this £20 million going into various cities. Well, I've got friends that own houses that are £20 million. So what sort of money that's going to do for a town? I just really don't know, John.
I love the way you say that.
Am I getting off piece here?
They're getting some new bins installed in that street for that money. That's what it is.
I think just do your due diligence. I think if you're looking to go, because the question was someone that's got 6 properties already and looking to go somewhere else, just speak to local agents, speak to the experts, and get that advice, and just look at the key market indicators. Look at how many properties are available for rent and are available for sale, and so on. Make sure the supply and demand curve is in the right direction and not oversaturated. All sorts of things that are obvious to us, but need to be stress tested.
Well, looking to the future is something called hope, isn't it? And that can be a bit
You've
expensive.
said that before.
Yeah, so it can be a bit expensive if you get it wrong. That's the only thing. Okay, great stuff, gents. Thank you. So, John, your question. Given the reported difficulties and associated costs surrounding green development practices, do the government think that the government's aspirations in this area have stalled? So that's another stall, isn't it?
Yeah, and they have. I have to. I'm not going to try to defend the government too much here, but I think the vicious circle that's come about there with increase in interest rates and the cost of living, with the initiatives they've also brought in to try and encourage green development practices, couldn't be more worse timing, because where you could try and spend more money on sustainable materials and energy efficiency, and then try and get that back from increased rents or increased sales on property, that's been squished because of market conditions.
Yeah. Well, John, look, you're into your cars, you know the car game. I mean, 6 or 7 years ago, we were being encouraged to buy diesels, weren't we? And that this was going to be the answer to everything. Yeah. And the reason I say that is because the government are pushing these heat exchange pumps for outside your house. I was listening to something on one of the radio stations the other day. An elderly person had been persuaded to have one of these fitted. It cost around about 40,000 quid to have it done. They then found out that her radiators were inadequate size in the house, so they all had to be renewed, one thing or other. So she was up to £50,000-60,000 worth of cost.
Which she's incurred.
Right. Her first month's electricity bill was 1,000 quid running this thing. And on top of which, just to cap it all, her neighbours were suing her for disturbing the quiet enjoyment of their property because of the noise from this wretched pump. So the government hasn't got a good record of getting these good recommendations right, has it? And you do wonder whether they should stay out of it a little bit.
They've got ambitious targets. In fact, I think they're the most ambitious target in Europe to be net zero by 2050. So, yeah. And we should be encouraging them to do that. But it's great to have the idea. We could come up with the idea about, and we want to be preserving the planet and coming away from fossil fuels and so on, but how are you going to implement it? Because there's no subsidy, there's no support. So back to the lady, back to myself as a developer, back to a landlord, if you put these high performance insulation in, triple glazing, air source heat pumps, where do you stop? If you are going to go electric, you need to put the charging facilities in place. All of this comes at the cost of the person involved with property. And that's not always sustainable, whether that's cash flow or whether that's, for example, in my example at the moment, I'm doing these barn conversions. The planning was long since achieved. I'm coming through the development. I'm talking to the local agents who are saying to me, you must put air source heat pumps in, you must put this in because the buyers expect it. It wasn't in the original appraisal. The bank loan, for example, which is something that you sign off from the appraisal. So where's that going to come from? It's going to come from us putting it in at our cost. And we probably won't get any extra increase in price because the market doesn't allow that. So it's a bit of a harsh one. It's coming straight off your bottom line.
By the way, I've mentioned this on the programme before. I was involved with a development down here where the local council insisted on 2 biomass boilers as the 2 backup boilers.
Yeah.
However, they never got used because the biomass fuel, the wood chips, etc., are so flammable, there was nowhere on the development to store them. So, that was 2 million quid just down the drain, which could have gone to reducing the price of the buildings or whatever else and being helped to somebody. So, I'd say the government haven't got a good record of making good recommendations, and I just wonder who will drive this at the end of the day. Whether it's going to be down to the individual developers who will create followings from people who are keen to see green innovation.
Following, and also by necessity. I mean, I'd like to be as sustainable and environmentally friendly as possible. I'm also trying to make money. I'm also trying to keep a reputation and build a reputation. So it all makes sense. It's just going to, at this moment in time, come at my cost, which is what I'm having to do.
I just don't think there's enough incentives for it, for allowing you to offset it for certain tax purposes, just to sort of you've got to do that because of expectation now.
Yeah.
What can I offset it for? Because they've changed it. They've changed the expectation. All of a sudden, there's a lot of people that have gone from profit to no profit to 2 years lost in a build.
And it could get worse.
Yeah.
And you mentioned diesel. So you've got diesel, the incentives that went with that, only to be taken away very quickly. Then electric cars, that's all been taken away, and the value of those cars. So the reason to save money in the first place and save the planet, $100,000 Tesla, suddenly it's worth 50K.
I had one of the first hybrid cars, and then but just very quickly they stopped the subsidy, they stopped the parking subsidies, they stopped the congestion charge subsidy, and I then just thought, well, why have I got a hybrid? What for?
Yeah, I bet you've gone back to petrol, haven't you?
I probably have.
Nuts.
Okay, well, there we are. That's all we've got time for in this half of the show. So join me again after the break when we'll be asking John and Ryan more of your questions. Hello and welcome back to part 2 of Property Question Time. I'm joined by John Reynolds and Ryan Hughes. Welcome back, guys. And Ryan, your second question is this. Do the panel know if no-fault evictions will apply to HMO agreements, which have, in practice, been for historically fairly short occupational periods? One of the dangers I can foresee is that if they do apply and a landlord has fixed supply costs for heating and energy in the agreement, that could possibly run indefinitely. And I suppose that's a real danger, isn't it?
Correct.
So if the terms of the lease, if the terms of the lease stay the same, I mean, you're absolutely stuck.
Yeah, and HMOs is always, I always advise it to an experienced landlord, because they are, for me, one of the top buy-to-let investments in terms of return, but also management. And heating, electric, Wi-Fi, now people want Sky TV, Netflix, all these adding into these packages, they really have to be watertight to make them work. That is just a very, very dangerous game. On top of landlord licensing and everything else, they're just making it so unattractive for landlords to, take the risk. It's just so, it's high risk anyway, being an individual landlord. But now to sort of say, well, no, you've got to do it, just meddling too much.
But do we think the government, if I put it politely, know enough to start dictating these terms for landlords? I mean, as you quite rightly say, in HMOs, it's quite complex anyway. You've got a high turnover of people, but if you then get people who take advantage of the system and say, right, I'm stuck here, I'm staying, I'm not moving, I want the same lease terms, renewing infinitum, then, I mean, just what is that landlord supposed to do? Where's he supposed to go with the argument?
I just worry where they get the information that's what needs to be put in place without any case studies. They need to talk to the individual landlords. We go to a couple of conferences and exhibitions, and you've got all the landlords there, and it's very easy to get them in the room and go, here's our thoughts, but they're not being listened to. They're going, let's look after the renter, which is great, but that's what landlord licensing was supposed to be doing, but they can't control landlord licensing. So now it's like, skip that, no fault evictions. Hold on a second.
Or rent caps.
Or rent caps. It's just a very, very dangerous game, especially with interest rates rocketing up. It's fine if they come back down, but rocketing up and you can't increase the rent. There's going to be so many people in negative equity over the portfolio. And some of them are running on very fine margins. Even the HMOs, once you've took them utilities out of the rental cost, they're still very, very fine margins, but just multiplied.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
In the late 80s, Ryan, we had the creation of the assured short-hold tenancy. I do wonder if it's not time to have new tenancy agreements across the board, you know, a whole new set of leases that cater for today's circumstances, albeit, you know, I can understand wanting tenant protection. I can understand landlords wanting protection, in other words, being able to get their properties back if they want them back. But I do wonder if we need a whole new set of legal documents.
The worry is, who would they talk to get that rewritten? Because as Ryan just said, they're not talking to people that seem to be immersed in the industry and understand it. I think one of the things that's frustrating as well is, you know, whether it's for votes or just the bigger ratio, there's obviously a lot more tenants out there than there are landlords. I think there's been a laziness, a lethargy, and in terms of landlords and the way they run their properties, particularly some HMOs, taking a lot of income out and not recycling that back in to, you know, anything that looks after the tenant or the property itself. The challenge now, as the price is so high and interest rates it's so squeezed, that actually anything a landlord might choose to do, they probably can't afford it, because everything's, you know, any profit they were making, yield, you know, is so squeezed, or in some cases probably negative equity.
Well, I think my background since being 15 years old all the way up to 25 was looking after about 280 of them. So we were very heavily involved in them. And what people don't realise is, when you've got these houses of multiple occupants, if you've not got the right management company, or you're not managing it yourself correctly, the wear and tear alone will eat through that profit. It really has to be so well managed to make it work. People come up with co-living and all these different situations, but when you look at the tenancies or the AST, I was a big fan of the AST, and to me, just speaking out loud, it just seemed very basic. 6 months, 12 months, 2 months notice either side. So they start on a 6 month. If they don't pay the rent, you give them 2 months notice, and at that 6th month, you can get your property back. If they're 6 or 12 months and they've done a successful 12 months, you give them the option of a rolling contract, which means both parties. Landlord still has to give 2 months notice, tenant has to give 4 weeks notice. I don't know, it just sounds really simple.
You know, keeping it simple is, in my opinion, always the best way. When you overcomplicate
this is trying to, you know, I don't know.
But it's all about surety, isn't it? A landlord needs to know what he can do and plan with his property. A tenant, quite rightly, needs an element of security. But what's always puzzled me is you get a lease, your tenant's read it, signed it, your landlord's read it and signed it. So why don't you just do what it says, you know? Come in at the right time, go out at the right time, and we all know where we are. How's that?
Love it.
I think the scariest factor that's coming is, if the government don't support the landlords more, as we've already seen the homelessness spiking, these people are just going to sell to owner occupiers. And I'm a big fan for getting people on the ladder, but it's like the government look at the private landlords, and it's like as if they don't exist. Like, where are all these people going to go? Because we can't build homes fast enough, and we stop building in certain places.
Yeah. But there's big money coming in for HMOs now as well, isn't there?
Yeah.
So there's family offices and so on that are coming in and buying them up as an overarching portfolio.
Correct.
Rather than the individual landlord, which, you know, the UK should keep. It's a key part of the demographic, but they are the ones that are going to take the biggest tonking here.
Yeah.
Particularly if they rely on that cash flow that they make as an income. And then it's, you know, how can they maintain these properties? How can they maintain a good standard?
I think the bigger landlords coming in is a good thing, because I think we're already seeing it, certainly in the London area, an increase in the quality of HMOs coming up to sort of co-living, where it really is super duper stuff. You know, absolute designer kitchens, fantastic common areas, and really good facilities. And I think that's great. Any progression like that is good.
I think there's just a huge misconception though with the HMO market, because it's as if student accommodation or the private landlord, you know, you can be talking about individual cases. There can be 100 fantastic landlords and one landlord, and they go, you want to see the state of that HMO? And that's it for all HMOs. Whereas our HMOs were very well kept in terms of new carpets, new beds every year. You know, we're talking 15 years ago, and they were our standards then. But you do get people that try to do it, and that's where landlord licensing sounds like a great idea, but obviously the implementation is the difficulty part of who's going to oversee it. But I do believe a rating system, like a food hygiene rating for that, would be, you know what you're getting.
Yeah.
You know, they've been rated a 3, they've been rated a 4.
I'm a great enthusiast of wanting to see smaller private landlords licensed by the local authority, just even if it means attending a half-day course on your obligations, your liabilities and everything else, and just making what the government call an accidental landlord aware of his responsibilities and the consequences of not doing so, of course.
Yeah, because that would flush out. And exactly what you said, I like the rating side of things, because I've been around top-end HMOs when the classic HMO was student digs, scruffy, messy. And actually, 15 years ago, when that was really being pushed, the amount of inquiries and demand from people that wanted that, it demonstrated that actually do a lot more of it. There are some landlords that won't or can't spend the money. Those that choose to or wanted to got higher rents, had a better standard of tenant, and ultimately would take some pride in having rating, like a 5-star, 4-star, 3-star hotel. And you could grade that through whether you do provide sky, whether you are providing refreshment and in terms of painting and the communal area being done regularly and so on, because it does get wear and tear.
All right, John, I'm going to have to keep you to 2 or 3 minutes on this one. So your question is, as a small developer, I wonder if the panel could advise on whether the banks are making sufficient provision and or offering enough flexibility in allowing for the increase of green development when appraising the acceptance or otherwise of a development loan application.
Ooh, that's very relevant. There are banks that I'm talking to that are actively trying to be more proactive to green loans and sustainability limited loans, but it's just a slight reduction in the interest rate at the moment. So kind of, we've already covered in conversation, just the costs. Your lady with the 40 grand, it became 50 grand. How far do you go with your energy efficiency, your sustainable materials, recycled steel and sustainable timber, triple glazing, high performance loft insulation. And so whether you're refurbishing or developing from scratch, a lot of that's going to cost a lot more. The answer to that question is the loan companies, they're ultimately looking at it on a loan to value. So as far as you're concerned, a developer, you've got to fit your costs in based on a gross development value and work back.
I suppose the natural extension of that question would be, are the valuers allowing enough?
No.
And I guess they're not, are
and
they?
Yet the estate agents, which I think I covered earlier as well, are saying, if you're going to do these 9 houses, these 10 houses, whatever it might be, we are expecting you to do air source heat, but the people want solar panels on the roof. And you're there saying, well, we haven't factored this in. They're saying, well, you'll be at a disadvantage. That goes back as well to which developers will choose to embrace that and which won't. And actually, in this market, can you afford to not? Can I afford to not do that and then be left with 9 houses that everyone says they're nice, but they haven't got this and this and this?
Well, you're between the devil and the deep blue sea, aren't you? You've got young people who want to get on the housing ladder and want prices at rock bottom, quite rightly so. But I'm afraid the sort of green ethos doesn't allow that, does it?
And what's interesting is the young people aren't so bothered, or they are desperately trying to keep the cost of living down, but they want the property. Downsizers are looking at it, right, we're coming out of maybe a bigger property that is not energy efficient. We want solar panels. We want everything. And so actually, depending on your market, whether it's just pure affordability, young people just want to be able to buy a property. The downsizers, the elderly people, they're actually looking at it. We want everything energy efficient. We want to be seen to be getting away from fossil fuels and helping the environment.
Okay, that's great. Well, Ryan Hughes, CEO and founder of Mr. Investa, thank you very much for coming in today. John Reynolds, CEO of Titan Property Developments, thank you for coming in today. I know it was short notice for you today, wasn't it? But thank you very much indeed. Good to see you. And I'm Stephen Galpin. Been good to have you watching. See you next time on Property Question Time.